Brazil's president, Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva, has called on the world's biggest economies to improve their climate targets aimed at cutting the emission of gases that cause climate change. The Brazilian president's call came on the second and final day of this year's G20 summit in Brazil. President da Silva urged rich nations to bring forward their targets to achieve net zero emissions within 5 to 10 years. Developed nations have historically produced the biggest share of greenhouse gases. Well, for more on efforts to battle climate change, we are joined now by Grace Malie. She's a rising national youth delegate at the COP29 climate summit in Baku. She's from the island country of Tuvalu, the first nation that could be deemed unlivable due to global warming. Thanks for joining us. Grace, we just saw that Brazil's president, Lula da Silva, trying to focus the G20 summit agenda on climate change. From your perspective, as someone who's from an island country highly threatened by climate change, do you think Lula da Silva's efforts were helpful?
Thank you. And yes, we appreciate and we recognize, and we also saw the statement, the declaration from the G20 leaders. However, as someone from the front line, as someone who climate change poses an existential threat to our lives, it is still not enough. We have heard, as we mentioned, trillions, from billions to trillions. Yes, we have so many countries who've also pledged to donate, to put funds into the loss and damage fund, but are we seeing anything at home? Are we seeing any differences? No. The seas are still rising at home, and at the expense of my people and my future descendants, so it's still not enough.
Now, developing countries are responsible for more than half of current carbon emissions in the world. The joint G20 statement there calls for more funding to be provided to help those countries fight climate change. Could this actually make a difference, Grace?
You know, I would love to be optimistic, but we've had the Paris alignment. We've had our leaders from the Pacific and the big ocean states have asked on mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage fund, and nothing has yet been done. And already the science and data have told us that our seas are rising because of fossil fuels. Science and data have already demonstrated that, but nothing has been mentioned on that, keeping our temperatures well below 1.5 degrees Celsius. These are the conversations that we've been having for the past 29 COPs, and nothing has been done yet. So I would love to remain optimistic on the G20 declaration, but more action needs to be done. We've had so many words, we've had so many big promises, but nothing has been done back home.
I'm sure that there's some there at the conference who would argue otherwise, that quite a bit has been done. But again, your country is a community that's threatened by climate change, as you've described. After this G20 summit, do you feel hopeful that something will change for Tuvalu and its Pacific Island neighbors?
I do hope so. As you know, the declaration came out of Brazil, and in the next COP, Brazil will be the host. So I hope that there could be more discussions and more action on the things that our G20 leaders could do, because they need to, you know, be great leaders and have more power and have more action on the things that they've mentioned in the G20 declaration.
Grace, thank you very much. That was Grace Malie, a climate activist from the island country of Tuvalu.
Thank you.
Well, also joining us from the COP29 Climate Conference in Baku is Celine Kaufmann. She's Chief Programs Officer at IDDRI. That's a think tank that aims to facilitate the transition towards sustainable development. Celine, thanks for being with us. Now, the joint G20 statement calls for more funding to help developing countries fight climate change. Could this actually make a difference, do you think?
Yeah, thank you very much, and good morning to all. Yes, the G20 sends very important signal to the COP30 here, and the commitment of the G20 countries themselves to upscale their financing to developing countries is a major step heard as well President Biden on the side of the G20 committing to replenish IDA, which is the development arm of the World Bank, and that's also an important signal to the COP29. Having said that, how it's going to collude and to move the negotiations ahead is not completely clear, because at the same time, the G20 communique sent contradictory signals when it came to phasing out of fossil fuels.
Now, we've seen countries like the United States reverse policy on fighting climate change when a new government is elected. How difficult does that make it, Celine, to assure that global efforts to save the planet stay on track?
It makes it quite difficult, in particular the geopolitics. It's not only the US. You've probably seen that Argentina as well made it quite difficult to get to the G20 communique by they wanted to remove the language on international taxation. The Argentinian delegation left the COP as well. And it's not only that, Russia's strike on Sunday on Ukraine was also a signal that geopolitics is not improving. And going forward, we know that geopolitics, through the elections, through the tensions, is a major factor in supporting countries to cooperate with each other. So yeah, it's making it very difficult, and we need, the willingness of core countries, EU, China and others, to show that they're still very much committed to the Paris Agreement. And Brazil, of course, which is holding the next COP30 in a year's time. So I agree, this is a very difficult timing, and it's going to make the task of Brazil quite difficult in the run-up to the COP30.
Right. Now, international efforts to combat climate change have been going on for decades. What else do you think that G20 nations can do to improve things?
G20 has been working to push some elements that are critical for climate change, because G20 is not only the summit that everybody follows, it's a year of work. It's different tracks, in particular in finance, and they've been advancing progressively a number of files, including, for example, improving the way multilateral development banks provide financing for developing countries. And that work is super important, and from that perspective, the G20 was quite successful. Whether it's enough, we don't think so, because it doesn't go fast enough. That's why we're not only counting on the technical work of the G20, which is moving forward, but also the political commitment of the G20 countries. Because we all know they are the biggest emitters, right? They contribute to 85% of emissions. So a strong commitment coming from them that they will be ambitious in terms of reducing their emissions is critical, and it's not too late. Given the geopolitics, we know it's not going to come from all G20 countries. But at least if some of them could take the lead, it would be a major step forward.
Celine, thank you very much. That was Celine Kaufman, Chief Programs Officer at IDDRI.
Thank you.